Welcome back to Prisoners of the Mind. If you've already previewed and studied the first three videos we just released yesterday, I believe, or this morning, we're now going to deal with a subject that's highly sensitive and yet quite revealing. I'm going to entitle it Prisoners of the Womb. And it is suggestive of the fact that we are born prisoners. Inside of those 9 months, and there is a generational bondage I'm not going to address today, but inside of those approximate 9 months of preparation to be placed into the world, there is a bondage that can occur. My goal is to share with you that the baby inside being formed is already embedded in indwelling a spirit, a human spirit, and that spirit is alive, receptive, and maintaining memory, as it will also displace memory into the cellular structure of the body. I want to begin with a quote from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, verse 41, when Elizabeth is talking about the situation of Jesus, and Mary comes to see Elizabeth, and of course she has John the Baptist in his state of the womb. And here's what Luke says to us from the King James. And it came to pass that when Elizabeth heard the salutations of Mary, the baby inside of her leaped in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit. Now, you have several things going on here. You have a baby leaping, a baby that heard about Jesus and the mother of Jesus, a baby that could respond emotionally to what it heard, a baby that had emotional structure already in place before birth, and a baby that had the spirit child already under development. Now, that was necessary to bring to your attention in order for me to introduce this topic that we will be developing later. And the topic is the prisoners of the womb. Now, the other one I want to read to you is from a medical doctor, Dr. Thomas Verney, and I want to read what he says about that period of time inside the womb. He says, in the 9 months between conception and birth, the baby begins to form drives, begins to form memories, begins to form personality, and this personality is formed and shaped for the most part before birth. Now, Dr. Verney basically says, don't think for a moment that the baby is not developing. In fact, I believe he says around 5 or 6 months, memory is already developing in its cellular form. There are other books equally as powerful regarding what the blood carries. So I want you to focus with me today in our brief time together on the spirit of the baby and where is the source of the problems of a child. I worked with a person one time who had some significant bondages in his life, and we have traced it back to a formation in the womb of his mother. Some of the peripheral things going on in his mother, with his mother, around his mother and father, were the loss of a child already in the family briefly before his birth, within a year perhaps, I believe. There was the fear of the mother losing this child now the same way. There is the struggles with the father, who went through all types of stages of dealing with the loss of the previous child. And what happened is the spirit of the baby became wounded. Now, traditional Christianity at least implies, if not directly says, that anything from the range of a child of Christian parents cannot be impacted. God protects them. To extreme views that the spirit of the child can't basically be hurt under parental care. But here we find that the baby has an emotional structure in Elizabeth already, and it's not an exception as you look through the scriptures. We have others that are listed similarly. And it rejoices, it leaps, and later we see that that joy that that baby showed played out the call of God in John the Baptist's life as he grows up without understanding, probably did not even know he leaped in the womb, but he knows without a doubt that he is a forerunner of Jesus Christ the Messiah. Now, what does that have to do with the 21st century? I'm glad you asked. What it has to do with the 21st century is this. Many of us, most of you, as well as myself, were wounded inside of the womb before ever being given birth. And those wounds came from catastrophic situations in our environment within the physical, emotional, spiritual, and psychological nature of the mother in particular, and in the environment of a father. I want to suggest to you that I have talked to some people. I had a lady come to me, and she said to me, I don't know why it is that I am so absolutely self-rejecting and scared to reach out of myself. In talking to her about trauma in her life, she didn't seem to realize or remember any particular trauma. But in bringing the sister in, the older sister, and speaking with her some, the older sister relates to me that the mother was considering abortion at one time of this younger daughter, and the father, during the early formation of the baby, vehemently made it clear to the mother, I do not want this child, you should have aborted it. Now, to most of us, we would say it's just a fetus, or it's an unformed child. What does it know? How could it have memory? And all the typical psychological and philosophical arguments that we like to give when we are petrified to face truth. However, in the journey of scriptural research from Genesis to Revelation, in view of the programming study of the human mind and those of us who deal deep in the soul, we have come to realize that the baby being formed indeed can be wounded. In fact, the child inside of the mother can become so wounded by the pain and stress and hurt of the mother. If the mother feels self-rejection, if the mother feels unworthy, if the mother has been abused, that baby will already being connected to the mother in ways that we have yet to discover, will begin to feel the same rejection and woundedness of the mother. We probably should stop right there and think of the far-reaching implications of that, but we don't have time. Now, let's bring in the father in stage right, and when he enters with his verbal bombardment of, we will not keep this child, you should have aborted this child, I don't want this child, to the traditional North American mind, even especially Christian mind, we would think, well, that hurt the mother, of course, and maybe wounded their relationship, perhaps for the entire marriage, but the baby probably came out okay. That is indeed not medically, psychologically, emotionally, or scripturally true. That baby is like a sponge, and it is absorbing not only the physical nutrients that it needs and the life processes that must be connected to it to live, but it is also absorbing the emotional environment and the psychological environment. And in my journeys of more than 4 decades, I have talked to many people who could not identify where their late struggles in life came from, as this woman whose sister told me that that's what was said as the baby was in its 2nd or 3rd month. When I brought the younger sister back in and talked with her, I said, so what is it that you really are struggling with? You're a 35-year-old woman or thereabouts. And she said to me, Doctor, this is what my problem is. for some reason that I can't shake, and my mother has passed away, I believe my mother and father never wanted me. Now, to many of you, you may say that's a good guess, but you see, it's far more than a guess. Scientifically, theologically, philosophically, psychologically, we know, many of us know, that that baby was being shaped and formed. In the scripture, there's a prophet that says, before I was conceived, you knew me. You made plans for me. So in this situation of development, you and I were being formed, and depending on the environment, the immediate family interactions, the mother's own thoughts and feelings, her mind, her predecessors, if she had family abuse, if the relationship with the father prior to her impregnation with that baby was rocky, those things have already set the stage for that child. And those things already set the stage for you and I. Now, that will play out in later times as the child begins to grow, because what it does is it bends the child's predisposition in a direction that normally we would not have gone. And for those of you who might say, well, the angels protect all babies, they do to a general degree, but not like you think. We have been taught scripturally a lot of erroneous teaching because we want to cuddle and rock and just believe the best of everything. We believe the best at the end times is going to be a great time for us, and we're just going to leave the earth and not suffer. But historically, for thousands of years, God's people have suffered even to their death. But all of a sudden, we're not. That's okay. That's one area that the church wants to sleep on. There are other areas that we close our ears and we look at the television and we say, how tragic, all these people dying. But if it's not happening to us, the next day doesn't change. But you and I, in the womb of our mothers, and if our mother kept us, still we were wounded. And when we're born, if the wounding is significant enough, that child will turn inwardly and refuse to have anything to do with the outside world or spirit world. Now, that particular imprisonment of the child in the womb will leave a situation as it comes out and grows from anything ranging from extreme volatile behavior to complete social, emotional, and psychological withdrawal, to all types of melancholy type temperamental issues of moodiness and depression and sadness, even suicidal. But you won't be able to put the finger on it. Regardless of the psychiatrists and the doctors and whatever is in your life, the counselors, the individual spirit, which is the real you and I, not the body that you see, not the Hollywood stars. It is the spirit being using the body to navigate in life, is so wounded, so close to God, that we don't even know how to communicate with the spirit, much less understand that spirit and soul are separate in a degree. So what happens when a child in the spirit begins to be absolutely shut down to the God? And remember, your spirit as a child, the spiritual you, is the only avenue, the only pathway of God really connecting with you as a person. So it is the adversary's desire, plan, and he manipulates the environment, which doesn't take much. It is the adversary who basically begins to say, well, let me bring in enough circumstances, like my parents were alcoholics, yours might have been addictive, yours might have been abusers, sexually, physically, verbally. And by the way, verbal abuse is equally, if not more devastating sometimes than physical abuse. We don't walk away and just flippantly become a whole person. Those intrauteral damaged memories, hurts, and wounds. Not only the soul encounters, the soul person, the physical person, the person that the Bible calls flesh, but more importantly, the real you, the spiritual Susan, the spiritual Robert, the spiritual Barbara, Larry, Bill, becomes deeply wounded. And its little window towards God closes. And the only thing you have left is a fleshly, soul, earthly bound part of you that will become known as Robert, Larry, Mary, Nancy, Bill, Susan. But it will not be. It will not be the real you. I am not talking about a rare instance. I'm talking about tens of millions of us, if not the whole earth. There's many scriptures on children, many scriptures on in the womb. Perhaps you should make that a study. But this particular subject that I'm approaching from an abused inner child. A child who not only was raised in an alcoholic home as my siblings, but a child that was placed in a cult, under satanic cult domination. A cult that knew that if you want to make a person a slave, you begin before birth working with the parents, and during the intrauteral stage of 9 months, you punish it, you traumatize it, and you teach it that God doesn't care. And if you can get to that stage by dominating the parents, programming the parents, working with the child, abusing the child, verbally saying things in the presence of the mother that are horrible and horrific about the child, physically abusing the mother there with the child, emotionally abusing the mother and the child, calling the child names, and using scriptures in reverse. God doesn't love you or your child. If he did, would he let you go through these problems? If God loved you as a child, where was he when you needed him? Where was he when your father abused you? Where was he when your husband beat you? Where was he when your child was sick and you agonized and your other child died? Where was he? Is that what you call a God of love? This is Satan's major platform, that before that child has many years in earth, that intrauteral child spirit will be imprisoned. And then there's the adversary world of demons that are sent through that damaged portal, which is legal ground, and they begin to attack the spirit and attach to the spirit and attach to the hotel rooms of the soul to stand guard and make sure that that child, that baby, as he begins to develop, never ever seeks the true and living God. And the demonic world will see to it that that mother and that child and that family will seek any possible avenue there is other than getting really in connection with God again and having true intimacy. And this baby will grow up never knowing intimacy, never having the ability to be intimate in a realistic way, never knowing love, always feeling self-rejected, always feeling rejected, always feeling unloved, always feeling that no one really cares about them and wants them, unimportant, and that God doesn't love them. And then the world around him, including and especially the so-called Christian world, will reinforce that over and over and over and over. And at the age of 18, from the journey of conception, the child will walk into the world shut off by God in most cases. It is imperative that we reach the prisoners of the womb by teaching the mother of the child how to reverse it, by teaching the mother that her own spirit is still deeply wounded and to introduce to them, as we will as we go down, how to overcome the adversary's abuse, the environmental abuse, and produce that godly child and the spirit to be reopened back to God and to begin to dominate the soul instead of where most of us, our soul dominates the spirit. And in closing, I'd just like to say, I know that you have heard many times how that it seems like we can't connect with God. It seems like we're just going through the motions, but to really feel the love, the presence, the communication, to know how to hear his voice and know we hear his voice, most of us as professing followers of Christ have no experience with that. That is because your spirit has been deeply wounded. And I encounter tens of hundreds of people who all over the world globally have been through some type of trauma, whether it be severe cult, as in my own case, alcoholic parents, addictive parents, abusive parents, verbally abusive, parents who themselves were abused, parents who abandoned them. These things, before that child comes out and faces the world, take the spirit and they imprison the spirit within the womb. And once that baby enters the stage of life, the direction of that child has been set. I urge you to stay in tune as we develop more of these. Each of the videos already existing regarding prisoners of the mind are forerunners of series of teachings on that area, as it will be with prisoners of the womb. I'd love to hear your comments. Be sure you get your name on the newsletter list so that we can send you these cutting edge teachings. My perspective of bringing this to you is this. I was a prisoner of the womb, purposely by those outside, purposely who those prepared my mother so that she would be addicted, open, and a portal for hell to enter her, and then an abusive family environment. And like others, my course was set. But praise God, at the age of 57, God said, enough, enough, and broke open the revelation of his Son. I look forward to getting back with you. God bless.